So, Harry, you made a masterful presentation a while ago. After all of that, I feel like a child at kindergarten compared to a university student. You know, I, after a good meal has been had and the scraps is left over, and a beggar comes by, I feel like that's all that's left for me now. You know,
Well, you know what's a beautiful thing about politics plus network. There's always more to be had, Joshua.
yes, sir.
Belly
Yes,
full
sir.
and more, it
Belly
is
full
more
and
than
more.
just. Yeah, man. You know that is the scripture with the two loaves and well, two fish and
Five,
five loaves.
five loaves and two fishes. All
Yeah.
right. In the meantime, one of the things that I want to look at until we delve more deeply into what you mentioned is some of the highlights for today. I think it's important that our listeners be aware that the Hermitage dam is to be upgraded. Don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah, man. It's
Um,
it's 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 one of the highlights we placed earlier. The
oh, you
expansion
did.
of it. Yeah.
Okay, you did.
What had the breaking news.
Right, and that's critical because while Kingston has been expanding, the infrastructure has remained largely the same from back in the some of them as early as the 20s. So this is a needful upgrade to the Kingston Hermitage Dam. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
I think we have added between the building of this dam to now nearly 500,000 new residents, and the dam remains the same.
The carrying capacity has been increasing, but the
But
actual
the sa-
aspect of things, they right. The
right,
producing aspect of it remains the same, and that doesn't bring us resilience. That doesn't improve the lives of people because, of course, you can have the nice, pretty apartments and improve buildings, but you have no water,
right,
and
right.
it's adding pressure throughout. It's not unique to the Kingston area either, but it's a beautiful work to see that we've taken these things seriously. We've seen how
Right.
these cities are improving and evolving at a rapid rate, and as such, the systems that brings it all together and supports it, the lifeline, if I may say so,
Hmm.
have to be able to carry it just the same.
Right. We also have another good news. The Education Ministry says PEP exams were successfully held despite Melissa's disruption. And the good thing about it is that it was almost equal at the same amount between male and female that sat the exam.
But that is always good news. Because the disparity, between both is something we always want to ensure it's closer than wider as the age expands. So it's definitely good news. It's something to build on, not to rest on
Hmm.
our laurels for sure. And
Right.
it's a right step for education.
Right. In fact, we had 120,000 more, 120 males more than females this time around, which really, is something big to celebrate because usually the females tend to be more. This time, not only did we equal it, but we had a little bit more in terms of raw. The percentage is just about the same, roughly speaking, statistically
Oh,
speaking. But the actual numbers is 120 more. So that's good news. Um, on that note, though, we have a little bit of sad news in the media fraternity. Don't know if you're aware of it.
yes,
Um,
Sinclair.
broadcaster, broadcaster Daniel
Oh,
Thompson has left
Thompson,
the media.
yes.
Yes, right. So that's not the very best in terms of the media, but the good thing is that he has ran his leg of the race, and we want to wish his family well along the journey and condolence to the rest of his family and extended family and friends. You know,
Al- Always. He's been, added value to the community and to the society. But when we look at it, you know, Joshua, the notes tonight took us through different eras,
hmm
and I would be only to be able to speak of two, and be of the two, I can only be fully informed on one, which is the present, right? But you is a man who lived all three. And I want to get to your perspective on policy around just one policy regarding that came out of Gilbert, Ivan, and compared to what we're seeing with NARRA, which is birthed out of Melissa's disaster.
All right. So I am not very sure about the policies that existed, but one thing we know in terms of trying to refresh myself about Hurricane Gilbert, upon the advent of Mr. Siaga to political office in 1980 as Prime Minister, he's the one who created the ODPM, and just as how NARRA is now being created for the rebuilding, reconstruction, and just looking at the overall expansion of the offerings to the people. So ODPEM was created so that we can better prepare for natural disasters that would take place. That in and of itself was a landmark event, and since then we are world recognized, internationally recognized as a result of that. So Mr. Siaga, being the visionary that he was, saw it necessary, having gone through Hurricane Charlie from the 50s and Hurricane Allen in the 70s. There's so much, as you rightly stated, you would have been lost just hearing the names of some of these. Charlie, everyone knows about it, but Hurricane Allen, not many persons remember it, you know. Then he saw it fit that instead of just being reactive, we can have preparatory mechanisms or agencies that prepare not only in terms of from a governmental standpoint, but the citizens of the country being ready to brace themselves and what they need to do in terms of having uh, lighting and food and additional water, perhaps even clothing and putting away their document. And one would think that these things are foregone conclusion and persons would have known. But the truth is some persons really don't think about those. Some persons actually gallivant. And even with ODPEM being in place, sometimes you literally have to be begging persons to prepare and take it seriously. So with ODPEM being created as an agency that look forward to these things, then persons were better able now to not only prepare but to get the necessary information as to the do's and the don'ts, and also where the shelters are. So it's a structured preparation as opposed to persons doing as they think is fit. So
So,
we yes, sir.
so,
Go
so,
ahead.
so in essence, the time frame around, getting this done would have been significantly longer, probably over several years of trying to refocus in terms of restoring school, homes, and critical infrastructure. If we compare and contrast to where we are now, that would have been acceptable then, but that is not applicable to today's society and what is required of a country where we are. And
Um, clarify that for me. You said the time frame would have been longer then. Time frame for what exactly?
for the recovery overall, right? Rebuilding efforts, financial assistance and so on. It would have taken a longer time frame for the benefits of these things to trickle down and to reach the very people that it should. If we compare that to what is being asked of the current administration, we see a lot more being asked. We see a shorter time frame. Compare
Um,
that.
all right, so that's a good place for us to be. But when I mentioned ODPEM, I was actually looking at pre-disaster preparedness. That was the original purpose of ODPEM, to get people ready to brace for what is coming, right? It later morphed into assisting persons after the disaster had passed. But the original thing was, how do we get persons? Because let us go back to the reason for the conceptualization as we're at NARA now. The reason for the conceptualization is that when we had a Hurricane Allen, which wiped out Jamaica basically, and was devastating at the time, and we also had, no, not Allen, but Charlie, which happened in 1952, and then Allen afterwards. right? And we also had what was known as a June flood, which happened, I think, sometime in the 70s. I don't remember when in the 70s. That messed up Jamaica, really wiped out our GDP. In addition to the fact that economically we could not stand on our own 2 feet. Then the vision, when Mr. Sinaga came in, one of the first creations that he brought about was the creation of ODPM, and it was a hurricane or a disaster preparedness vehicle, right? That was the primary purpose. So before it comes, what is it that we need to do to brace ourselves as a nation? To ensure that bulletins reach the people where it is at that particular point in time, how much miles it's traveling, to help people to understand what inches of water would mean, the wind speeds would mean, and how it's gonna impact your life.
So, so,
How
so
do
in so in essence, there, Joshua, we would be at that time, we were focused around um how to be prepared and coordination process. It's
right,
really resilience like framework, which was mentioned in the notes. Rebuild
right.
and do so incrementally. But if we look at what is being asked, no,
All right.
would what
So go ahead.
with what would have been done, those old ways that we build on. When we look at administrations that would have stuck with those ways, haven't evolved them prior to this administration, I'm speaking, right? Seeing what Melissa has caused, we can no longer look to those ways to be reactive and to just figure out in just trying to be resilient and to build back what was there. We have to build forward, which means we have to be ahead of what is coming.
And you're correct, sir. In fact, the creation of NARRA has taken it several steps ahead of where we were because whilst ODPM was designed to get us prepared before it hits, it was never created to rebuild afterwards, right? And so we look at from 1980 to now, right? That's what, 46 years ago, right? 1980 to now is 46 years. And in 46 years, we have not come up with an agency or any arm of government that says, how do we not only rebuild, but make ourselves, as you use the term, and the Prime Minister has made it popular, how do we have a dedicated national recovery and rebuilding vehicle, right? And what really is NARO about? It is for that purpose that I mentioned. It's a dedicated national recovery and rebuilding vehicle, and it deals with forecasting for the inevitables or the future events and creation of smart cities or data-driven planning and building. I know that's a whole lot of things I just said a while ago. So let me go slower for those who may not have gotten it. It's forecasting. So forecasting is really looking ahead in terms of now that we have gotten here, how do we build cities that we really can withstand anything that's coming? So whilst we have the
How do we build
municipalities
better?
that right, how do we build better? And that's what I think the Prime Minister is trying to convey to the rest of the nation, right? And I think it's unfortunate that the opposition is not joining in, considering that they want to rule, because it would have been so much easier for them, God forbid, and I'm saying that now that they become government, it would have been so much easier for them in the event of a natural disaster if they join in the chorus and help people to understand what all of these things are about. Because forecasting says, how is it that we prepare ourselves by through our building codes that we already have, but not just the building codes. How what lessons can we learn from the disaster that we have faced? How did it impact us? And the smart cities that we're looking at building, you know, um, where do we build? So it's not
But,
just
but,
how,
but,
but
but Joshua,
where. Yes,
but
sir.
now, NARA takes us from just the building, right? From
Uh
just
huh.
the physical infrastructure to a philosophical shift. From this the
Right.
state being a responder to the state being a designer, creating design that the people buys into, to not necessarily rely on a government when it comes on to a disaster, but to be in tandem with the government and what it
Ah,
wants to do for the country. How,
and
how do you see it?
that is why I use the term forecasting and saying that the opposition really has a role to play in helping the people to understand. Because if you're gonna forecast and if you're gonna design something, and if the people are gonna be walking hand in hand, as is how a democratic society should really function and perform, then how do I walk hand in hand with you if one, no one is teaching me, no one is sharing the information, or I don't take the time out to learn for myself? Now, if the government alone, if the government is pushing one thing and the opposition is pushing a false narrative, which is counter to what the government is putting, then what it's doing, it runs the risk of defeating the purpose of what this thing is about. However, I have confidence, and based on what we have seen so far, NARA is going to be the game changer, right? Not just for Jamaica, but I believe that it will be a model to be replicated internationally because one of the things that two ministers of government in particular has said, and that's Delana Seabright and Robert Nesta Morgan, is that they were tasked by the Prime Minister to visit other countries and to learn from them how they fared, as it relates to the whole process of rebuilding. And they looked at different models, New Zealand being one. You can remind me of some of the other places,
New
Eric.
Zealand, Japan, US,